I do want to say that I get through the intro flawlessly most of the time.
Yeah, I'll send you a cookie. Now you just turned off. Was that like your mic drop? All right, everyone, warm up those brains. It's time for the Get More Smarter podcast. This is episode 243. I'm Jason Bain.
I'm Ian Silveria. This week in the Get More Smarter podcast. Oh no! The big bullshit bill has hit some serious roadblocks. Wait, sorry. Oh yay! The big bullshit bill has hit some serious roadblocks. And by some serious roadblocks, we mean the opinion of the vast majority of voters. How does it play in Paonia? Then, it turns out that cutting healthcare kills people. You mean you can't just rub a crystal on it and call it good? Next, the big bullshit bombing of Iran maybe slowed their development of a nuclear weapon down by a few weeks, despite the president's claim that he totally obliterated their enrichment capacity. We ask, what the fuck, man? Then, your federal lands are safe, for now. Sort of, we think. Ask us next week. And finally, we go through some updates on the 2026 campaigns, even though, yes, indeed, it is still 2025. But first, she's the president of Cobalt Advocates. Karen Middleton is back on the pod to talk about Colorado's exceptional progress on abortion rights since the disastrous Dobbs decision overturned Roe v. Wade about 3 years ago. Take a listen. It is now my absolutely extreme pleasure to introduce our guest today, Karen Middleton, the president of Cobalt. Karen is a nationally recognized leader on abortion rights who has led Cobalt since 2013, building the organization into its current position as a powerhouse advocacy, public policy, and political organization. Cobalt also runs the independent Cobalt Abortion Fund, which has seen patient needs skyrocket since the Dobbs decision 3 years ago, which we're here to talk about today. Karen previously served as the president of Emerge America, a national organization that trains women to run for elected office. And before that, she served as the majority caucus chair for the Colorado House Democrats in the state legislature from 2008 through 2010. And before that, she was the 7th Congressional District Representative on Colorado's State Board of Education. Karen Middleton, welcome back to the Get More Smarter podcast.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you giving me some time today.
Well, so we're having this conversation, like I mentioned, roughly 3 years after the Dobbs decision came down, overturning the protections for abortion rights in Roe v. Wade. Take us back to June 24th, 2022. Where were you when the decision came down, and what was your first reaction?
I'm going to take us back to 2019. In 2019, Brett Kavanaugh, we knew we were in serious trouble, right? As the Supreme Court kept shifting. And what was happening over a period of about 3 or 4 years it was like a contest across the state legislatures. Which bad anti-abortion bill can I pass in order to get challenged up to the Supreme Court in order for us to overturn the decision? So by the time Dobbs hit, we had that leak, you might remember, in May, which came just a couple of weeks after we signed into law the Reproductive Health Equity Act here in Colorado. So by the time we hit June 24th of 2022, I think it was resignation and frustration, but not being completely surprised, to be honest, just because I feel like we'd had the canary in the coal mine for a while. I will tell you about that day. Interestingly, I participated in a press event with Michael Bennet, our senator, and he came back from D.C. and was meeting me to just give remarks with some other organizations and other folks. It was about 4:00 on the day of the Dobbs decision. And he walked up with the decision in his hand that he had marked up and read the whole way back. So he knew it from top to bottom. So he read more of it than I did, I will admit. But I do remember just knowing how devastating it was.
In the 3 years since that decision, what would you say has surprised you most about the changing landscape, both nationally, but mostly in Colorado?
I think in Colorado, the immediate response to let's go even further to protect care. Let's pass lots of legislation. Prior to the 2022 law being signed in, the Reproductive Health Equity Act, it was like pulling teeth to get bills introduced and passed. So the fact that in 2023, we were able to pass a package of 3 bills. So we had the SHIELD law, had requiring commercial insurance to pay for abortion. And we also had a law going after fake clinics and misleading commercial practices. So those passed in 2023. And then really starting in 2022, we began to talk about the ballot measure to protect abortion access and to allow public insurance to be covered with state dollars. I think that the surprise for me was how thoroughly the Dobbs decision had moved voters before even having to talk to them. There was an awareness. I also remember that media, before Dobbs and after Dobbs, no one said the A word. After Dobbs, every reporter from every type of outlet was talking about abortion on national media, local media, in all forms, and that was a real game changer. So I think the level of awareness that Dobbs brought to your everyday voter was pretty surprising to me, but in a good way for Colorado.
Well, my daughter was 15 or 16 at the time, and I remember her saying to me out of nowhere, "What the hell? What's going on?" Like, I was, pleasantly surprised. Like, everybody figured it out right away. How are the anti-choice groups in Colorado pushing back now?
They've diminished almost nothing. I will say, I'll take now to the last legislative session when we were running another 3 bills this year. The implementation bill for the ballot measure was up in committee hearing, and there were 5 people who testified against that bill, 2 of them on Zoom. It used to be that anti-abortion activists would show up en masse. We've had everything from the scary guys who've come from Arizona and Texas to intimidate people to the usual suspects. Really, the opposition in the legislature was close to 0, which was very, very new. I've kind of given up, but I think they've shifted issues because on June 24th of this week, there are some zealots who filed 6 ballot measure titles. 4 of them are specific to abortion and banning abortion. Life begins at conception, a statutory and a constitutional, another scary version, both ways. And then 2 that go after gender and another anti-LGBTQ title. But all 6 of them were submitted by the same 2 people who we have seen many times before. So they appear to not be done, but in my opinion, they're not reading the room. As
Right, personhood doesn't work.
No, the last ballot measure passed by 62%, and we won all 8 congressional districts.
That's right.
So, period. I mean, everybody across the state supported this, so it was not just a partisan or metro area type of bill pass.
I want to tie the last 2 things you said together about how there used to be a ton of anti-abortion people that came down to the Capitol all the time, anytime the issue got brought up, and then this sort of like pathetic effort by the bad guys to try and relitigate a conversation they just lost very handily. Like you mentioned, Amendment 79 passed with a 62 to 38 margin in 2024, which is like catastrophic. Like nobody sees those kind of numbers on anything. Were you surprised by that margin of victory, or did that kind of align with what your expectations were to win all 8 congressional districts and to have such a commanding victory like that?
I am surprised we won all 8 congressional districts. I'm not surprised we won at that margin. And part of it was long ground game, right? We did civic engagement and organizing for a decade across the state with a set of organizations that worked with different communities, from the legal community or grassroots community of ACLU to Planned Parenthood to the Interfaith Alliance to Progress Now to New Era Colorado to Calor. Everybody had a group that they were engaging, and we were doing that over a really long period of time. The other thing that makes us really unusual and outside of what other states see is that we defeated ballot measures going back, the most recent crop going back to 2008. So if you think about those margins in 2008, 2010, 2014, and 2020, especially, we're the only state where you've seen a ballot measure where we have said that banning abortion after 22 weeks is not a good idea. No other state really has had that conversation, and we have. And so I think if you look at the numbers from that ballot measure and you look at the No 67, we were still right in, kind of in between those.
Beyond just protecting abortion access, Amendment 79 also addressed insurance coverage. You mentioned this a minute ago. Can you explain that provision and why it was so important?
Absolutely. So in 1984, there was a ballot measure that passed that put into the Constitution that state dollars could not pay for abortion. And that meant that state Medicaid dollars could not pay for abortion. So the bottom line was or state employees. So
Right.
the example I would use is, as a state legislator, I had health insurance through the state. It would not have been allowed to cover abortion access because of that ban. And people who are on state Medicaid, it couldn't cover abortion access. So we really framed it and talked about it as public insurance. We also, before we did that, there are two things we did. One is we adjusted the Medicaid reimbursement rates so that when this came into effect, the rates are competitive enough. In fact, I think I've heard they're some of the highest in the country. We set those rates up ahead of time, so we planned ahead. And the other thing is that we passed a commercial insurance bill. Planned Parenthood led on that one, but making sure commercial insurance plans had to cover abortion care so that there was then a sort of equitable treatment of anyone who had insurance, whether it was from the state, from Medicaid, or from their own state-controlled provider, it was covered. Now, remember, a lot of insurance plans are outside of the state purview. If it's a federal ERISA plan or self-employed, we can't control those as much as we would wish to, especially this week. We can't control what the federal government does, but we can control what Colorado does. And so we've gone a long way to protect those changes. And the commercial insurance is already in force. The Medicaid coverage will go into effect on January 1 of 26.
To your knowledge, are there other states following Colorado as example in protecting choice the way you worked with the legislature here?
There are other states that have run shield laws that look similar to ours. Passing ours and then putting the update in makes us among the strongest in the country, but we're not the only ones. So I think New York went back and adjusted their shield law. I believe New Jersey. I don't know all the other states, but I would say we're in good company, but it is not widespread. But definitely we had national experts working with us who are working across other states where this is a possibility. The combating, and this is pre-Amendment 79, combating the fake clinics is hung up in the courts. So NIFLA v. Becerra was a case in 2017 that came out of California that tried to say that if you're a fake clinic and you're pretending you offer abortions and tricking people into coming in to find out you want to give them a pretend fetus and a pack of diapers and call it good, that falls under religious freedom, which is unconscionable. And what's happening in a lot of anti-abortion states is that they are making fake clinics the choice to go to. So they're funding them. In fact, Fun Tidbit, Focus on the Family, that I don't see much action from them in state. They're funding the website in Nebraska to pick which fake clinic you would like to go to that the state of Nebraska has helped fund the infrastructure for. So we're seeing really it's crazy making. You get bad information. In fact, we see people delayed in care if they think they're going somewhere where they can learn about accessing an abortion. They go to a fake clinic and then they have to start all over if they make it through.
What happens when they show up at this fake clinic?
We've seen different stories. So they will try to talk to you and counsel you about why you shouldn't terminate your pregnancy. A lot of times they'll offer free ultrasounds, and we've had everything from inaccurate ultrasounds to not getting your own ultrasound. And we have, there have been people who've done Better Business Bureau type of assessments where they will get somebody else's ultrasound in order to try to convince them to continue the pregnancy. Those places also offer medication abortion reversal information. And the premise is medication abortion, you get two types of meds over a 24-hour period. The first one is mifepristone. The second one is misoprostol. One stops the pregnancy and the other one expels the pregnancy. And it's basically a chemical reaction that does that.
There's no such thing as a reversal, right?
Well, no, but what they say is, gosh, golly gee, you got this far in the process and you went home after dose 1 and said, whoopsie, I made a mistake. Again, questioning whether we know how to make our own decisions.
Right.
But they also then load them up with progesterone, which has been found to be so dangerous when it was tested as a solution that they had to stop the study. This was back in about 2015, 2016. There was a big effort to prove this theory, and the theory, it's just junk science, and it actually harmed the patients that were implicated. But if you go to your local friendly fake clinic, you can fundraise to say, here, I'm going to donate $7,500 so we can save someone's baby. And then they will essentially pretend that that's something that they can do. But it's really dangerous. And it also says that we don't know our own hearts and minds. If you're trying to get an abortion these days, you've already made the decision that you want to get the abortion. I think a lot of times the patients or clients are treated as if they don't know their own mind, if they just thought about it a little longer, hence the waiting periods.
Well, I can't even imagine going to a doctor and saying my arm hurts and they show me an x-ray of someone else's broken arm. I mean, that would be
Correct.
crazy.
Yes, yes. And the other fun trick is they always, we've had bills that have tried to say mandate ultrasounds, which, by the way, early in pregnancy are transvaginal ultrasounds.
Right.
And my favorite party trick is to bring an actual ultrasound wand, which is it looks like a big dildo, basically. And that you would have to really, it is an invasive thing. So unless you're consenting to that, I don't think some rando state lawmaker should decide that you have to use that on me because I walked into a clinic and said I needed access to care. Now you might choose to have that, but that's two very different things. And that's the reality of the amateurs, meaning state legislators trying to do science and medicine, which, ask RFK. He's not good at it either.
So since the overturning of Roe, Colorado has seen a huge increase in people coming to the state for reproductive health care. And we know the Cobalt Abortion Fund was founded, I think, slightly before that, but has seen, I think I read somewhere, an 800% increase in the amount of funding and the amount of activity. Tell us a little bit about the Cobalt Abortion Fund and if it's still operational, how folks can give if they want to.
Oh, absolutely. So, so the Cobalt Abortion Fund started the same year that the Medicaid ban went into effect in 1984. It came out of the First Universalist Church and a group of folks wanting to help people when they heard the Medicaid ban happened. They said, this is wrong. In about 2017, we began working with the folks that had been running that. It was volunteer-led. One woman answered every email for the prior 8 years to us taking it over while working full-time.
Wow.
And they were raising and spending about $60,000 a year. So we negotiated to come together and bring it into Cobalt. And we started providing access to funds at the end of 2017. And we have seen exponential growth. So we, in the year of Dobbs, we raised and spent about $1.25 million, which I think was double from the year before. And then Dobbs' decision tripled volume, and we also became a travel agency. So we had people needing practical support in addition to just procedural care. So we have expanded both. Last year, we spent $2 million, slightly more than $1 million on practical support, meaning the meals, the train ride, the bus fare, the airplane, the babysitter, anything you need to get the care, and procedural support was slightly under $1 million. We are working to raise $3 million this year, and we have staffed up we used to have a half position staffing this. We now have 5 full-time staff who navigate patients. We have kind of a case management system. So if you call and you talk to someone, first call, they take you all the way through and make sure you get everything you need. And we are actively traveling around the state and talking to folks about increasing the support. We still have a lot of people across Colorado that we help. So maybe we're helping them get from Durango to Denver or, from another part of Colorado. We also have people coming from other parts of the country. The largest influx is Texas. We also help a lot of people in New Mexico, and we are continuing to see growth. So we've been growing exponentially. We have never turned anyone away. We have always said we would meet every request that came to us. We capped our fund last year. We said we can't go any higher than 2.3 million, and we didn't go over that, so we didn't have to say no to anyone, and we're continuing along that philosophy. It's very important to me that if we have the time to make policy and do all of the political and endorsement and civic engagement work, the fact that we can turn around and help someone today, tomorrow, and the next day gives me goosebumps every time, that we are literally changing lives in the moment with each phone call that we get. And it's very important. And if you go to the regular Cobalt Advocates website, you can find it there. But there's also, if you just Google Cobalt Abortion Fund, there is a special place to go if you just want to donate. And also if you want to learn more or refer someone, we have patient information there as well.
I wanted to ask you about a recent Supreme Court ruling. Well, actually, they declined to hear a case that effectively allows states to exclude Planned Parenthood from Medicaid funding. Can you explain a little bit about this and how it affects, if it does, Colorado?
So Colorado Colorado's Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains has not accepted Title X funding since about 2019 in order to protect themselves. And they have not been able to accept Medicaid for abortion care. It will be coming online January 1st, like everyone else. So by my read of the case, states with unfriendly legislatures and political leadership are able to exclude Planned Parenthood from Medicaid funding within their state for the whole range of services. The case took place in South Carolina. There are Planned Parenthoods in banned states or in difficult states that will be immediately affected. But I think overall, it just affects the total ecosystem of the Planned Parenthood network, which is really devastating. So having, they've, like everyone else, have seen exponential increases, and trying to meet those funding needs in an ongoing way can be really damaging. So we're hoping that they can ride out the rough waters and that we will be able to figure out how to support. I also think it makes our electoral landscape critically important to continue to protect everyone who provides abortion in the state.
So even though we're getting an avalanche of bad news from the Supreme Court, from other states, 3 years in of Roe being overturned, what gives you hope these days?
I think the fact that people have been honestly showing up and supporting the abortion fund, that they're showing up and supporting allied interests. So, for example, one thing that we just did is we got very involved in the Douglas County home rule case, because the home rule case could have had an impact on folks on the ground. They thought that they would be able to overturn abortion access.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That's what they thought.
Good job. Those guys got their asses kicked. Yeah.
Yeah. But we actually did a lot of digital text and turning out volunteers. So we also stood at the Capitol a couple of weeks ago when the state of Colorado winds challenged the governor around releasing names. And we stood there and we turned out people to that protest. So we've mobilized a lot of people that can work across lines and can also engage. A lot of people came out to No King's protests. A lot of people showed up to Juneteenth. I feel like we have a bit of an army that we can engage, not just in protecting abortion, but in supporting access to democracy and making sure that these runaway efforts don't get very far. And I've been really pleased that we can turn people out to really stand up and support. I think the resistance is strong. And I think that people who support abortion access are also going to want to protect trans youth, which is a big target, right? It's to fight abortion, hence they're not showing up. But now they're turning on people who are less able to help themselves, which I find just cruel and horrendous. So we're going to be there arm in arm with our partners and allies across a range of issues in order to save democracy, keep abortion safe, and keep moving.
So for people who are listening to this and thinking, man, I really should get more involved. I love everything you're saying. What would you direct them to do, Mike, specifically?
Well, if they want to get involved with Cobalt, we have a call to action page right at the website. So you can, it's always time, talent, and treasure, right? You can contribute your time, get involved in a committee or engage locally. You can attend events and learn about some of the topics and issues that we cover. We have a intersectional book club that meets virtually. You can make a donation. You could set up a small recurring donation to the abortion fund. You can get involved in political work and help show up to support or oppose things that are happening. And we will, if you're part of our list, let you know about everything from home rule to taking action with sister organizations or through Indivisible. And you really have a way to get involved across the spectrum of issues that are important to us.
Great. Well, Karen Middleton, congratulations on all your success protecting reproductive rights and healthcare in Colorado. Thank you for the work you're doing. And thank you for coming back on the Get More Smarter podcast. It was so awesome to see you again.
Thank you so much for your time. And I appreciate you having me on this hot Friday.
Yes, indeed. Well, stay cool out there or in there or wherever you are, and we'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, let's talk about the big, beautiful bullshit bill that the Senate is still discussing and is still pretending that it's going to be able to get through reconciliation and get it back to the White House by July 4th.
I was just thinking about this before we started recording. This is like their Build Back Better. Like, remember, like, the big beautiful Biden bill? It's even like Big Beautiful Bill, Build Back Better. It's even got like the 3 Bs. It like fell apart, and like they had to try and pass it all piecemeal in those first 2 years of the Biden administration. This is starting to feel like that, right?
But there's a reason that historically you don't pile all kinds of shit into one bill and pass it. It doesn't work. The Congress is not built to do that kind of thing.
No,
So,
Congress is built to contemplate tiny changes and then fail at even those.
well, yeah, there's that. So the Senate is running into a bunch of problems. As we've discussed, this is beyond the fact that Americans hate this bill, and more numbers make that point. There's a great tweet I saw about a rundown of some of these numbers. Fox News, only 38% favorable. Quinnipiac University, 27% favorable. KFF, we talked about that last week, 35%. Pew Research, 29%. Washington Post Ipsos, 23%. So this doesn't even get to 40% favorable in any poll.
And what's interesting is that the unfavorables all break 50 except for two. Fox News, 59% unfavorable. Quinnipiac, 53% unfavorable. KFF, 64% unfavorable. Oh my God. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that, like, if you're like a Gabe Evans or a Jeff Hurd or hell, even a Jeff Crank, you should start thinking very seriously about not voting for this thing if it comes back across the hall.
I guarantee you there is a large number of Republicans in Congress who have their fingers crossed that something will derail this so they don't have to vote again.
Absolutely. No doubt.
And as you know, if you've listened to the show, the bill would pay for tax cuts for rich people by slashing funding for Medicaid. The Senate proposed a new amendment that would actually increase those cuts, but the Senate parliamentarian ruled that it won't work within current
Which is
Senate
great
rules.
news, because the Senate parliamentarian used to spend a lot of time fucking up Democratic policy priorities, and now this week there have been not one but two ways in which that same person has said, no, you can't do that. And at least for now, it seems like senators are listening.
Yeah, I mean, there's been some talk about, well, we need to fire the parliamentarian, as they always do, like shoot the messenger, even though any competent parliamentarian would say, no, this still doesn't work. It doesn't matter who's doing it. But this is great because, as the Denver Post had reported, the Colorado Hospital Association thought the state would lose an additional $10.4 billion over 5 years because of these new Medicaid cuts that the Senate had proposed.
That is like a amount of money that will shut down dozens of healthcare facilities throughout the state, and mostly in the rural part of the state, right?
Yeah, yep, absolutely would destroy rural hospitals, and it would cut a whole bunch of other things, as we've been talking about. You can't try to offset these cuts somewhere else unless you're cutting education, or you're cutting roads, or that kind of thing.
The president of the Hospital Association raised concerns about provisions that would forbid using Medicaid funds to cover gender-affirming care and punish states like Colorado that use our own money to insure undocumented people. Like, stay the fuck out of our fucking business, would you? Like, nobody asked you for this. We didn't vote for any of you assholes.
No. 10th Amendment is irrelevant to them. Meanwhile, former Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is sort of giving us the perspective of why this would still be moving along, even though everyone hates it. And it's a good reminder of what a dick this guy is.
Yeah, he's the king of moving things along that everybody hates, including and especially himself.
Apparently, in a closed-door meeting with Senate Republicans, he told people worried about the Medicaid cuts that the American public will, quote, get over it.
Isn't Kentucky like a really Medicaid-heavy state?
Yeah.
Like the one he's represents?
He's not running for re-election, so he doesn't give a shit. I mean...
This dude is not going to have one of those like deathbed conversions, is he? Like he's not going to like be lying there at the end and say, you know what?
No.
Got a lot of regrets about how I treated people, things I did to this country. No, he's just going to take the
I hope when he
escalator
passes,
straight
they
down.
don't do the whole, like, let him lie and state in the Capitol thing.
I don't know. There's some
Unless they're
comedic
allowing people to, like,
opportunities.
piss on his coffin.
All right.
Then, that would...
You just took it way too far.
Then I'll
in
do
the
that.
direction.
There's also new information about why this bill would be so terrible, beyond just the people that would lose insurance and health coverage. Turns out cutting Medicaid will kill tens of thousands of Americans.
Yeah, this from an unfortunately named publication, The Annals of Internal Medicine.
Yeah. At least they got two N's in there. The proposed policy could cause an estimated 7.6 million Americans to lose health insurance. 2 million people would lose their primary doctor. 1.3 million would not be able to fill medications. The end result, according to the annals of whatever it's called. What's it called?
Internal medicine.
The end result, according to the annals of internal medicine, more than 16,600 people could die as a result of losing this healthcare access or foregoing care.
Yeah, I just did a control F for the word death on this website and found, 129,000 to 838,000 people would forego needed medical care and result in somewhere between 651 and about 13,000 medically preventable deaths annually. Great job.
So you can literally tell people now, if you vote for this, you will kill tens of thousands of people.
You will have blood on your hands, pro-life party.
Unbelievable.
Not unbelievable, perfectly believable. Absolutely 100%
actually,
perfectly
right. I gotta
believable.
stop saying that. Unbelievable if you're a normal human being.
It's a death cult that is putting forth cultish, death-dealing policy. It makes unfortunate amounts of sense.
We talked a little bit about whether or not they can actually get this bill over the finish line. One of the reasons I think that it may not is that Republicans are again panicking about these cuts, including the bread sandwich, who our congressman from the 3rd Congressional District has found a new level of jackassery.
And we know you listen to the show, so this segment is absolutely for you, Representative Hurd.
This is, you should be embarrassed about this. And Hurd ran.
You don't have to do it, man. You don't have to do it. You can be a hero. It's your choice. You get to pick. You actually get to pick. How cool is that?
Right.
Is it worth it?
You remember in mid-April, Hurd was one of a dozen Republicans in the House who signed a letter saying they would never vote in favor of legislation that made deep cuts to Medicaid. A month later, 2 months later, he voted for legislation that would make big cuts to Medicaid, so doing the exact opposite of what he said he would do. His district includes the single largest percentage of Medicaid recipients in Colorado. These cuts would close many of the rural hospitals in his district. So recently, Hurd signed another letter telling the U.S. Senate that he would oppose legislation that made significant Medicaid cuts.
Those letters don't seem to do very much, though, is the problem.
Not even for him.
You write the letter, you take the wrong vote. Then you write another letter. What are you going to do next time?
Yeah.
I also want to point out that this happens from Colorado Public Radio's Caitlin Kim, reporting from Punchbowl News that around the same time as these letters are getting written, Republicans Gabe Evans and Jeff Hurd got about $213,000 from Mike Johnson's unfortunately named JFC, which in this case stands for Joint Fundraising Committee, grow the majority. So for the low, low price of $213,000, you too can have a representative who will kick you off your fucking healthcare and close your rural hospitals.
But then sign letters saying he won't. But then do it again.
Is this like flood the zone? I don't think he's cynical. I think he's stuck. And I don't have a ton of sympathy for him because he could just merely decide to do the right thing in this case.
You can't do this twice. Like he wrote the letter, then he caved. You can't do it again.
Yeah, that move is available maybe once, right?
You can't do it again. Like no one, I'm sure anyone who's reading it is like, yeah, you won't vote for it. Sure, right. Like the last time.
Just be a hero, bro. We will go to war for you if you vote no on this bill. We will make sure a Democrat does not win. We will do everything we can to help. Do the right thing, man.
The other fight going on in this bill is about whether or not to end clean energy subsidies. The House version of the bill eliminated many of those programs, including that popular Home Smart program that you see the stickers on refrigerators and things if you're buying a new fridge. House Republicans voted for this as part of the original bill, but then many of them, including Congressman Gabe Evans of the 8th Congressional District, realized their mistake and said, oh, hey, Senate, can you fix this for us?
What is this fucking vote and then beg, or like vote and then write a letter and then take credit for the thing? Like, it's just it would have all been avoided if you just voted no and stopped it from happening to begin with.
Right. That would have been
Future
the easier
Gabe
way.
doesn't have to ask past Gabe to act differently. Future Gabe can just make a different choice.
Eliminating these programs is bad for jobs in districts like the 8th Congressional District, which is now losing, as the Colorado Sun reports, a third major clean energy project because of the proposed subsidy cuts.
And this one absolutely fucking stings. This is a $190 million battery plant that not only would have helped anchor Colorado's burgeoning EV industry, but would have created countless other jobs and innovations and startups around it to support and work with and innovate on top of this huge, giant, awesome investment that would have been so good for us. People would have been moving here. And to your point, this is in Gabe Ish's district.
Yep. So there's a battle about whether the Senate can put these back in, because then House Republican leaders like House Majority Leader Steve Scalise says they'll take it right back out. The good news is I think this is another reason why this bill probably never gets to the finish line.
Wait, so let's talk about this. Do you really think the wheels are going to come off the bus here?
I do, because I just don't see how they can accomplish all the things. I mean, there are a bunch of little things that they put in here that keep getting pulled out by the Senate or the House or whatever. And those are things that I think helped strong arm some votes. Remember, the House only passed this by what, one vote?
Yeah, it was one vote because Tom Massey voted present, I think, right?
Right. So, whatever the Senate does is going to drastically change it. Is the House going to just agree with that? Probably not. Then we go back to the Senate. I don't see how this ends.
I think that's because the margin is so slim and because it has taken on so much water. I think hopefully you're right. But Donald Trump doesn't actually care about policy. He probably doesn't know what's in this bill. He cares about loyalty, and he cares about fealty, and he cares about every Republican bending the knee to him. So that's why I would be pretty surprised if it wasn't just like full court press on the arm twisting to get it done. But that might actually not work if people's survival instincts kick in here.
Well, and I guess to me, what does getting it done mean?
Right, fair enough.
You've got to figure out a way to appease everybody when you've even got people like Senator Josh Hawley, the Republican from Missouri, otherwise a horrible person, but he's been really firm opposing Medicaid cuts.
Right, because he understands that if he wants to be president or continue to serve a state like Missouri, he cannot throw in whole hog with this nonsense.
No. So somebody's got to blink for this to get to the White House, and I don't know who is going to. All right, let's talk a little more about our dear leader,
Ayatollah Donald.
Ayatollah. After our last recording over the weekend, President Trump went ahead and decided to bomb Iran and target their nuclear facilities. That decision looks a little less great a week later. Let's start, though, with after that Saturday night attack. Here's what Trump said in an address to the nation.
To the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
So as it turns out, a leaked report from the Defense Intelligence Agency says that we only set Iran's nuclear program back by a few months.
Great job. That was like $250 million worth of ordnance and personnel and logistics and all this stuff for a few months. So, Jason, were the facilities completely and totally obliterated?
It depends on what you mean by completely, totally, and obliterated, I guess.
I just mean those words. And they're regular definitions.
Guess not. I mean, Trump, even after this report leaked, he put out a statement on Truth Social saying the nuclear sites in Iran are completely destroyed. They're not.
No. And then it was like he telegraphed it a week or so before he did it anyway. He's like, I'm going to make a decision whether or not to bomb Iran in like 2 weeks. And Iran is like, he's definitely going to bomb us. We should move
all our stuff.
Everything right now. And they did.
Right. Trump is furious about this leak, but it's a problem of his own making, as we've been discussing here. You can't believe anything he says.
Nope.
And there's no reason for him to go this far. He didn't have to say they were completely destroyed. He could have said, we sent a message.
We took out key capabilities. We set them
whatever.
back a ton. Like, whatever. Just like, but here's the problem. It's dear leader bullshit. He probably believes it. They probably told him that's what happened.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
People like Caroline Leavitt, his like dear leader press secretary, said, the leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump and discredit the brave fighter
Right.
pilots who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. You almost have to hand it to her that she is like just down with the program 100% all the time. No daylight.
It's just another no, like that's their
Nuh-uh.
that's their response to everything.
He says perfect. She says perfect. He says obliterate. She says obliterate. On message.
Here's Senator Chris Murphy, a Democrat from Connecticut, talking about the briefing that some members of the Senate Intelligence Committee received and why this was no surprise to him.
I'm not going to talk about anything from the briefing. And I walk away from that briefing still under the belief that we have not obliterated the program. The president was deliberately misleading the public when he said the program was obliterated. It is certain that there is still significant capability and significant equipment that remain.
Knowing what you know now, would you have authorized it? Knowing what.
And then here's the White House with their response.
Caroline, leave it here for your viewing pleasure.
The Iranian regime was weeks away from being able to produce a nuclear weapon that would threaten the entire world before President Trump took this decisive action on Saturday night to obliterate their nuclear capabilities. The contrast in leadership could not be more clear. Barack Obama and Joe Biden sent pallets of cash, American taxpayer dollars, in a failed attempt to buy the Iranian regime's compliance with a weak and ineffective deal. President Trump sent a fleet of American warplanes to destroy Iran's ability to produce a nuclear weapon. The United States and the entire world are safer because of this president's decisiveness.
For like a month
imagine
or two.
Being a member of the press corps in that room and just having to fucking sit there through that shit every single day?
You know what this does, though, remind me of? I've long had this theory that instead of spending tens of millions of dollars dropping these kinds of bombs, what we need to do is collect our largest, heaviest, like old refrigerators and washing machines and just drop that.
I think the
Two
half a
birds with
mile
one
of
stone.
concrete underneath or between the surface and the enrichment facility might get in the way, but I hear you.
The refrigerators would also not obliterate Iran's capability, but at least we wouldn't have them sitting in a dump somewhere.
Fair enough.
Trump is also really missing the point on how world leaders are dealing with him now.
The lesson here is don't text Trump. He really likes to screenshot your shit and share it.
But I don't think they care about this. I mean, this is the NATO Secretary General sent Trump a message that Trump copied and put on True Social, saying that, congratulations and thank you for your decisive action in Iran. That was truly extraordinary. It makes us all safer. You're the best, blah, blah, blah. Trump is convinced that this makes him look really good. I think it makes him look ridiculous because it shows that world leaders universally understand that to get what you want from Taco Trump, you just blow smoke up his ass.
Yeah, you just got to flatter him and he'll do anything you want. Bribe him or flatter him and you get whatever you want. What a great way to run a country.
That's
What a
not
great
strength.
democracy we have here.
And before we get off the subject of our dear leader is really earning his taco nickname, which stands for Trump always chickens out.
President, thanks very much. On July 9th, is that July 9th date set for tariffs to snap back, or could there be a...
We can do whatever we want. We could extend it. We could make it shorter. I'd like to make it shorter. I'd like to just send letters out to everybody. Congratulations, you're paying 25%. He doesn't want. He's a much nicer person than I am.
Your words mean nothing at all. Is
It's
that
fucking
tariff are those tariffs gonna go into effect? Maybe not.
I'm so
Who
glad
knows?
I'm like an American political consultant with like an email job instead of somebody who has to like worry about production in another country and shipping lanes and things like that. Because holy shit, bad time to do business in America, man.
Absolutely. We have an update on a subject we talked about recently, the federal land sell-off that Senate Republicans have been proposing. The Senate parliamentarian also ruled recently that they can't do that. It doesn't work procedurally. Senator Mike Lee from Utah is trying a different approach to mandate sales of only Bureau of Land Management lands. As we talked about last week, selling off public lands is both absurdly unpopular and wouldn't even make a dent in helping to pay for the tax cuts for the rich.
How the fuck does Utah, who are like actually kind and generous people, despite being like politically conservative and largely Mormon, keep sending a freak like Mike Lee to the U.S. Senate? Isn't there like another Mitt Romney banging around somewhere who could like come in and like unembarrass them?
You would think.
This is crazy. This guy belongs to like more like Oklahoma or Texas. Like he does not have the vibe of Utah.
Nobody wants this, man. It's just,
I mean,
except
oil
for like a
companies
handful
want it.
of builders. That's it.
Oil companies want it. Mining interests want it. Some weird home builders want it.
But I mean, like,
the weirdest thing is that the constant justification for this is like the housing crisis. It's like you're gonna build a bunch of condos in fucking Yosemite. Like, what are you doing?
Right. And who's gonna live? Who's gonna live there? Like the low income
former
people,
park rangers who no longer work at the park because it's no longer a park.
Right. Unless it's free mortgages, you're not going to get anyone up there.
It's insane.
Denver Congresswoman Diana DeGette was in a House Health Committee hearing recently with Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. She did a good job of smacking him around, but also demonstrating that RFK either doesn't know anything or is just going to keep pretending he doesn't know anything. Here's that first clip.
Secretary, members of this subcommittee sent you letters seeking information on February 13th, February 28th, March 13th, March 20th, March 25th, April 1st, April 3rd, April 9th, April 10th, April 11th, April 28th.
She's got the receipts, baby.
This is like peak DeGette, man. This rules.
June 11th, June 17th, June 22nd, and June 23rd, to which we have received no response from your agency whatsoever. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter these into the record, please.
Just like hands on a stack of paper.
On June 16th, a federal judge ruled a large swath of NIH grant terminations illegal and void and vacated them, requiring that the grants resume. These grants deal with science that is disfavored by this administration, as we just heard from the witness. Judge William Young, a Reagan appointee, said that the administration's explanations for terminating the grants were, quote, bereft of reasoning virtually in their entirety, end quote. He added, quote, I've sat on this bench now for 40 years and I've never seen government racial discrimination like this, end quote. Mr. Secretary, I have a yes or no question. Does the department intend to comply with Judge Young's ruling? Yes or no?
I will comply with
yes
the
or no,
law.
sir?
I'll comply with the law.
Thank you. As reported in your
DeGette later asked a question about the DOGE Defend the Spend program as it applies to the Department of Health and Human Services, which is basically just extra red tape to approve any sort of spending, even like
extra red tape
hotel
from the
rooms.
Department of Government Efficiency.
I asked this about this in the April 23rd letter over 2 months ago, to which you have not responded, and I'd like some answers. Yes or no? Did HHS conduct a cost-benefit analysis on the Defend the Spend procedures?
I don't know anything about
You don't know,
that Washington Post article.
In letters, you don't know whether you did a cost-benefit analysis, right?
I don't know. I know that I don't
Okay.
know anything about that Washington Post article. I
No,
don't
do you
believe
know
it.
anything about the Defend the Spend initiative?
About what?
The Defend the Spend initiative
No.
that your agency has? You don't know about it.
This
Mr.
fucking
Chairman,
guy.
here.
I do kind of like that, like RFK Jr. the Pinata is sort of like how every member of the House, what is that? Commerce, Energy
Health
and Commerce.
Committee and under Commerce and Energy. It's a good long
Yeah.
title.
Treats him. It's just like have a fucking ball day for House Democrats every time that dude shows up at the Hill.
Right. And then here's one more question about a letter that a bunch of scientists signed asking that grants for the National Institute of Health be reinstated or not cut.
On June 9th, hundreds of NIH scientists sounded the alarm on how this administration has wasted millions of research dollars, injected politics into science, and damaged the public trust. 68 Nobel laureates signed this letter. On June 10th, we sent you a letter. Of course, we haven't gotten a response with our concerns that you or your staff might retaliate against them for telling the truth. So here's my question. Will you commit today that neither you or anyone else at HHS will take any retaliatory action against the brave scientists that work at NIH? This should be an easy answer because it's illegal.
I can commit that we are absolutely depoliticizing science.
Will you commit that you will not take any
Biden administration, Ms. Chairwoman, the Biden administration politicizes science, and I just gave you 3 of thousands of examples of how they did that.
Excuse me, sir. I asked you a simple question. Will you commit to not taking retaliatory action against the NIH scientists that signed the letter about the research dollars? Yes,
I don't know anything about that letter.
You don't know about the letter?
No, I don't know anything about that letter. This is the
Okay, well,
first
we'll
I've
put
heard
that.
of it.
We already put that, our question in the record. I'd like a response.
Does he not know anything? Or
No,
is
he
this
doesn't know
just a game?
anything. He doesn't know anything. He never knew anything. He doesn't know anything now. He's a fucking wackadoo conspiracy theorist with a worm-eaten brain.
Yeah, I don't know.
You're doing the Tim the Toolman Taylor version of the RFK.
God. It's easy though. You have to pretend everything is like the most baffling question you've ever heard. That's the response. All right, let's talk about some 2026 updates and things that happened in recent elections and how that affects us. The home rule effort in Douglas County got absolutely hammered.
Yeah, we talked about this with Karen Middleton a little while ago, and holy shit, it's worse than I thought it was. Douglas County tried to embark on some kind of polis-smashing, Democrat-hating campaign to create a home rule charter, which a few different counties, including Denver, Broomfield, and I forget the other ones, have done over the course of Colorado's existence. Home rule basically means you get your own little special constitution for your own little local government, and you can do whatever you want with it. The good people of Douglas County, 71% voted no to 28.84% who voted yes. I'm not sure I've ever seen an election
out of 93,000 votes too. Turnout.
Oh yeah, and people showed up. I also like that the county commissioners themselves ran for. So this was a thing where, like, if it passed, it would have put this board together with these commissioners. There was an at-large one, and then district commissioners, and Abe Layden and George Teal, who are 2 of the current commissioners, ran for this and didn't even get first place or second place
or third.
These are people whose political careers appear to be heading in the other direction.
Well, that should be the case, because after you hear this story from 9 News and Kyle Clark, you'll wonder how Douglas County Commissioner George Teal ever got this on the ballot to begin with. Here's more from Kyle Clark on these Chinese communist claims.
County are voting today on the first step toward home rule, which would give the Republican county commissioners there more power. And now the commissioner leading that effort is claiming without evidence that the Chinese Communist Party is funding the opposition in his county. The group he pointed to is run by a woman of Asian descent.
I mean, here's a nationwide, funded by China, funded by a communist organization that's actually trying to work against the people of Douglas County, having a say in local control issues.
Commissioner George Teal is making that accusation against a local political committee called No Little Kings. When I asked him for his evidence that they are funded by the Chinese Communist Party, Teal told me, quote, "Is there evidence it isn't?" The group group was created by a Dougco resident. She's a cancer doctor from Highlands Ranch named Aiko Browning. Financial filings show nearly all of the $14,000 this group has raised is her own money.
I am of Japanese heritage. You know, that's not the same as China, though. And I am an American citizen. This is with my hard-earned cash that I, as a citizen, wanted to help inform our neighbors as to what's going on here.
Backers of Home Rule and Dougco have misleadingly suggested that it would allow them to opt out of controversial laws passed by the Democrats who control the state capitol. That's not true. Home Rule does not change, for instance, gun laws, abortion regulations, the minimum wage. Home Rule applies to things like zoning and how county departments work, the number of commissioners, how long they can serve. If tonight's vote passes, a Home Rule charter would go on the ballot in Dougco in November.
Aiko Browning, you're a fucking hero. If you listen to the show, email us at ian@getmorestarted.com or jason@getmorestarted.com. We would love to chat with you about how this whole thing
Japanese
went down.
descent, or just not China.
God, what a badass. That is good stuff.
I'm also just shocked that Teal says they're going to keep putting this on the ballot. This is not unlike Colorado Springs, the city council there. We talked earlier this year about how they were trying to maybe put another ballot measure up to ask people to revote on legalizing marijuana, saying, oh, well, they didn't understand. And they eventually abandoned that after getting a bunch of backlash to it. And in this case, too, you lost 71-29. It's not like a 52-48 loss.
This isn't like the ballot language was confusing. This was like you got the shit kicked out of you for good reason.
Right.
And the fact that it doesn't even do what they are claiming it does, to the point at the end of that clip from Kyle Clark, like what are we
Some of
doing
this,
now?
I think, is also related to the efforts to create a water pipeline from the San Luis Valley.
Yeah, I kind of feel like the whole there's gotta. I was talking to a friend who said it was all like developers who were funding it, so like it's got to be some kind of like zoning thing that is using the cloak of communist Denver rule and like Chinese Communist Party propaganda to try and like make it easier for developers to like take your house and put some condos there or some shit.
So I've got a question for you about 2026.
What's up?
Is the 5th Congressional District, where freshman Representative Jeff Crank is currently serving, is it winnable?
I would like it to be, because I think Jeff Crank sucks.
Jessica Killen, a former chief of staff to Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff and a longtime Capitol Hill staffer, is reportedly
You
going to run there.
mispronounced New Jersey native Doug Emhoff.
Oh, yeah. Killen has an impressive resume, including being an Army veteran. I talked with a friend of the pod, Andrew Bauman, about this recently. His argument in a nutshell is that the 5th is moving to the left faster than any district in the country, which is true. Also, Kamala Harris performed better in the 5th Congressional District than she did in the 3rd. My argument is that I've heard this before for years. Being a Republican in the 5th Congressional District always seems to be more important than anything else, including the military background. In 50 years since the district was created, it has only ever elected a Republican. I do think El Paso and Colorado Springs are changing. I just don't think it's there yet.
I do want to point out that on ColoradoPolls.com, in an article you wrote, the margin of victory for Doug Lamborn in 2016 to 2024 went from plus 31 to plus 14. So that is more than half. But it still needs to do that 2 more times to become truly competitive for a Democrat.
Right. I'm like you. I want to believe this is true. I just don't think it is yet.
If the environment shifts 15 points, then it's in play. But that's a big if.
I will also say this. If it were ever going to switch, 2026 might be the year. Because of
a backlash
the Medicaid
to Trump, Medicaid, and the Crank is doing absolutely nothing but bending the knee and licking the boot every chance he gets. So, there it could happen. I think we might need to wait for the next 2026.
Yeah. Let's also have our obligatory discussion about what the New York City mayoral race means for 2026 in Colorado.
If it means $8 halal in Denver, I am in.
There's been a lot of talk about whether the victory by Zohran Mamdani over Andrew Cuomo and a bunch of other people in the Democratic primary in New York City means that Democrats should move further to the left, or what does that portend for 2026? I don't know. My take is that the big lesson is that Andrew Cuomo ran a campaign that it's kind of the GOP playbook in Colorado, saying that the crime is rampant, the city is terrible, whereas Mamdani talked about how things could improve under his leadership. I think that's the bigger lesson. But what do you think?
I think that's true. I also think that like Andrew Cuomo is a uniquely terrible candidate, and anybody who decided that was a good idea should re-examine how they view politics pretty significantly. Zohran was personable. He ran a great campaign on the nuts and bolts. He did innovative stuff. He talks about the things people cared about. And I think he did it in a way that, yeah, sure, you could label him as a democratic socialist. That will hurt you in other places that are not New York City. It won't hurt you in New York City. I do think that Democrats can take a few lessons from this. One being, don't run disqualified sex pests who resigned in shame.
Right.
Ever, anywhere, for any fucking
theoretically
office,
should go with
obviously.
That saying. Yeah.
And also, like, charisma is good.
Yeah.
Like, campaigns are good. People who have personalities are good. We should run more of them. Like, I think it's less about the nuts and bolts of, like, the policy. Like, people getting wrapped around the axle about, like, government-run grocery stores. It's like, that's not the dude's main thing. He was doing a future-oriented, aspirational message with a personality that met the moment at the right time and happened to run against a catastrophically bad candidate.
Right.
More than almost anything else. So, like, lessons for Democrats in Colorado: have a personality, swing for the fences, put some bold ideas forward, do all that stuff. And if your opponent happens to be a disqualified sex pest, bully for you.
All right, let's do a couple of quick hits and then we'll get out of here. Let's start with our fuck around and find out of the week. This is a good one from Colorado via our friend Kyle Clark of 9 News.
A COFAFO, if you will.
A former postal worker in Mesa County has been sentenced to 5 years in prison for intercepting ballots during the 2024 presidential election and attempting to commit voter fraud in order to see if you can commit voter fraud. See, if you're following this, she is now at the finding out stage process. First, you know. Former mail carrier Vicky Stewart, one on the left, was convicted on identity theft and forgery charges. Prosecutors say she and her friend there, Sally Maxton, conspired to test the system of voter signature verification. They say the mail carrier intercepted the ballots. Her friend filled them out and signed them. Elections officials say Mesa County systems flagged 9 of the fraudulent ballots. 3 made it through and were counted. Ballots are separated from their identifying information when they're counted, so we don't know who those amateur election sleuths voted for. Maxton's due back in court next month for a plea and sentencing hearing.
We've talked about this with Tina Peters, and like I've gotten yelled at by listeners for like having some sympathy for her because of like grifters like Mike Lindell who fucking like put forth this ridiculous conspiracy theory in order to try and prove the 2020 election was stolen. Like, these poor women just had their brains destroyed by nonsense and now they have to go to jail. That sucks. I hate that.
Yeah, but they didn't have to do this.
I know. And
I think the bigger
again,
lesson is the one we've always said on the show. Say it with us, kids.
We made a whole theme song about it once.
It's always a Republican.
A Republican.
Always.
Every time. If it's voter fraud, if it's child sexual abuse, if it's anything they're accusing Democrats of, it's they themselves committing.
And I will repeat our promise on the voter fraud angle. As soon as we find a story of a Democrat committing voter fraud, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
We promise. As soon as it happens, we'll tell you.
Here's a new idea for a segment that has a built-in theme song from one of my favorite bands. You want to hear it?
Yeah, I would.
Fuck you, Laura. You took my only friend. And although it's all my fault for blaming myself.
Wait, I think it happens again. Yeah.
Say, fuck you, Aurora. You took my only friend.
Yeah, fuck you, Aurora, indeed. A prominent and regular spokesperson for a group seeking legal action against an Aurora police officer who fatally shot a black man last year has filed a lawsuit against the city because the city council, as of June 9th, has eliminated public comment at council meetings because they were tired of hearing about, bad things, I guess.
I do like how one of the pull quotes from the article is, the ban on public comment is nothing more than the snowflakes on Aurora City Council shutting down important political discourse because they don't like being criticized.
Yeah. And the way they wrote this ban, they said it's about this issue particularly, but it could end up banning public comment until the lawsuit is resolved, which could be years of no public comment about anything.
The architects of the ban on public comment, specifically Danielle Jurinsky and Mike Kaufman, are thin-skinned hypocrites who are the first to cry, quote, I've been canceled when someone calls them out for their vile and baseless political attacks, but waste no time engaging in actual censorship by using their government authority to retaliate against Black women speaking truth to power, lawyer Andy McNulty said in a statement. Hell yes.
Remember, this is one of the few major cities in Colorado still run by Republicans, like Mayor Mike Kaufman. This is why you don't put him in charge.
If you're a funder, if you're a Democrat, if you're a Democratic funder, this is a solvable problem.
Yes, it
It
definitely
doesn't
is.
have to be like this. The good people of Aurora deserve better. And as we talked about with friend of the pod, Juan Marcano, who should be mayor right now, that was like 2 years ago already.
Yeah, it was.
The only reason this is the case is because Aurora has, quote, nonpartisan elections. In other words, big special interests put Republicans in office, and nobody knows they're Republicans because it doesn't say so on the ballot.
We've got a audio clip I wanted to play that just made me laugh. Here's Arizona Democratic Congressman Greg Stanton talking to former Arizona candidate Carrie Lake, who now oversees Voice of America for the Trump administration.
That's not how you treat other people that are
The
being
gentle
questioned.
lady will suspend, please. Go ahead.
You lost for governor in 2022 to Katie Hobbs. You lost even worse to Ruben Gallego for Senate in 2024. Well, Arizona has another election for governor next year. Will you do us all a favor and run it back?
That's so good. No commentary needed. That's fantastic. And finally, our gibberish of the week. Alex Noraste of the libertarian think tank, the Cato Institute, was talking with friend of the pod, Representative Jasmine Crockett, at a recent House committee hearing. We'll get to his quote in a minute. First, here's the setup with Jasmine Crockett questioning a visa for Melania Trump.
In this country. And since we're talking about integrity, I'm confused as to why my Republican colleagues aren't talking about the lack of integrity when it comes to the president's family's visas. Let me remind y'all that Melania, the first lady, a model, and when I say model, I'm not talking about Tyra Banks, Cindy Crawford, or Naomi Campbell level, applied for and was given an EB-1 visa. And what that stands for is an Einstein visa. Now, y'all that don't know, let me tell you how you receive an Einstein visa. You're supposed to have some sort of significant achievement, like being awarded a Nobel Peace Prize or a Pulitzer, being an Olympic medalist, or having other sustained extraordinary abilities and success in sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. Last time I checked, the First Lady had none of those accolades under her belt. It doesn't take an Einstein to see that the math ain't mathin' here.
I love that. The math ain't mathin' here. Now, here's what Noraste said later in part.
But I also wanted to defend Melania real quick. Not everybody could marry Donald Trump, and I think that's quite an achievement. So I think she deserves credit for that. Nobody up here could have done it.
You sure right. I couldn't do it. But anyway.
She's so good.
That's a great way to end this week's episode. That'll do it for us.
The Get More Smarter podcast is a production of ColoradoPost.com and the Bighorn Company. Your hosts are me, Ian Silveri, and America's dad,
Jason Bain,
who managed to figure out how to engineer and produce this thing. Megan makes the video. Thank you. I do other stuff, and she does other stuff, and Jason does other stuff. We all do other stuff. We can't pay our bills with podcasts. The phenomenal Breakmaster Cylinder made the theme song. Get your shots while you still can. Protect your trans kids, your autistic kids, your immigrant kids, and any other kids in your life. Really. Send us a message. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a comment on Spotify, or reply to a post on Blue Sky. We might read it on the air, like this one. Fan mail. Wish me luck. Going to the judge overseeing my appeal, baby doll. Great. Thank you so much. Whatever that was. Subscribe
we
on
played-
YouTube, Apple,
yeah.
Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you got more smarter. It actually helps a lot. Find us at getmoresmarter.com where you can sign up for bonus content in our Substack. And please send all angry and non-angry rants to angryrants at getmoresmarter.com. Other stuff to Ian at getmoresmarter.com and other stuff to Jason at getmoresmarter.com. Thank you, Karen Middleton, for being our guest today. And thank you so much for listening or watching or absorbing this through osmosis. However you're getting the pod, we appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
We're still working on the smell version of the Get More Smarter podcast.
Hold on. I didn't know we had a segment called Fuck Aurora, and one of my favorite songs ever is by a band called Alkaline Trio, and it's called Fuck You Aurora, and we're gonna play
Ooh,
it.
nice.
Sorry, Megan. There's just a lot of shit to sift through.
I do. I also I'm excited that this we can use this clip from Droog.
Your old Droog?
Your old Droog. Yeah, there's a line, because we're talking about Mitch McConnell, I can use it in the cold open where he's got a line where he says, "You can't see me like Mitch McConnell's top lip,